Hey there, Alan Matthews here from Classical Guitar Shed, and in this video we're going to be talking about fermatas, how to play them, all the different types of situations we find fermatas in, the two main types of fermatas, and how to make sure that you're using the right one for the situation you're playing in, and more. Coming right up. Right, so to begin with, what is a fermata? A fermata looks like this. It's sometimes called a bird's eye as well. It's this type of sign, and that means that the note that it's written over or under holds longer than the written value. So in this case, this is an eighth note. It normally would just get an eighth note amount of time, but now with the fermata, it gets more time. It floats underneath here. Here's a quarter note, and then there's also a fermata under that. So the questions then we can have is, well, how long do I hold it? When do I come back in? And that's really important, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But first, let's talk about the two types of fermatas. I think of these as the two main types of fermatas. So first type of fermata is a very special technique type of fermata, and I call it a comic fermata, where you're going along and I gotcha. It's that type of situation. So this is the Villalobos Choro Tipico. Little wrong note in there, but it's just you're going along and all of a sudden, bing, time stops, and it's like, I gotcha. The music seems to say that. It's funny. It's kind of a humorous type of playing. The fermata doesn't fit into the rhythmic structure that has been set up. It's like Wile E. Coyote blasting off of a cliff face where he's just running and all of a sudden there's no more road under him. He's just like he's ran off of a plateau, and it's just, and then it's the joke like, oh, now there's no floor, and then he falls down. It's the exact same type of humor is that. So if you do your fermata that way, make sure that that's the effect that you want. The other type of fermata, which is more common in music, is what I call an organic fermata, or the fermata, the rhythm of the fermata fits into the rhythmic structure of the piece. And we do this this is Leo Brouwer's A Day in November, and he actually writes this in here, which is smart. You retard into it. So for most fermatas, unless it's like the comic type that you're really making a particular statement with, you want to retard into fermatas, and that's the biggest rule. And so even if there's one thing that you take away from this entire video, it's whenever you see a fermata, always retard into the fermata. So why is that? Well, a fermata, it floats. It suspends time, and so we can think of, if we think about floating, it's almost like we're airborne. And then we come back in and land and go again. Well, we need to set that up, because if I just didn't do anything and I flew up into the ceiling right now, it would be strange. But if you saw me duck down and push off, then it would make a little bit more sense. It would still be impressive if I could actually jump into the ceiling right now. But it would at least make sense in your mind, more so than if I was just sitting here and all of a sudden flew up. And that's the exact same thing in music, is that the retard tells your listener that something rhythmic is happening. And so that makes it to where the retard and the float, or the fermata and the floating note, makes more sense because we've been set up for it. So in this one, where does this start? So it was at tempo. I'm just playing the wrong note. Still at tempo, retard, more, and boom, and then there's a certain amount of time based on the retard and and the loudness of the notes, then it will determine how long it needs to hold. Listen to this. Well, now I've waited too long and it's going to be weird when I come back in, right? It didn't. So there is a perfect length of time for any fermata based on how you approach it and how you play the fermated note. So if you really place the fermata note correctly. So we have, so if I wait a little bit longer there, and boom. Now this one's going to last longer. I can already know because I placed it further. It's called an agogic accent. You place it a little bit into a little bit late. If you do it a little quicker, then it doesn't want to last as long. So then, as you do this, one of the main ways you can always be right with your timing is to subdivide. So if you think about 16th notes underneath your 8th note, so you have so then you can think of this smaller note division slowing down and speeding up, and that will govern it, tell you exactly where to place each note. And then you can speed up getting back into it. And the rate at which you speed that wheel back up, you can also think about a train going into a station. And that's your last note. Same thing if it's speeding back up. And you can vary that rate of speed up depending on how it is that you want to do it. But ideally, we never completely stop at these fermatas. The danger with the fermata is that it stops the music, and we don't want it to stop the music. We want the line to continue and to keep going. So ideally, like this, we don't completely go out for a beer here, because then the listener has to, well, this is the exact same as the beginning of the song. And so now we know it's like, oh, we're just repeating again. Instead of this moment that just brings us back to a familiar place. It's a whole different, sense of arrival to the listener at this point. So another thing that you can do to make fermatas work is whenever it's a part of a line. I mean, this one has a big long note and then it's kind of an accent, or just the next beat. But one of the things that you can do is crescendo into a fermata, and that will also make the length of time make more sense. So on this one, if I decrescendo, it's a particular effect, right? If I crescendo it, it creates more musical tension that way. So it's a choice, right? Both of them worked in this particular instance. Sometimes if you get quiet into the fermata, if it's not a very strong point, then it can just let the music down and kind of suck all the energy out of it. And then it's like, yeah, I really have to overcome inertia to get back up to where you were. A couple of other situations where we have fermatas. One is at the end of a piece. So this right here, this is a little lullaby. It's a little fuzzy, it looks like, by Isaías Sabio. So here we have fermatas, and it's the very end. So then the question is, do you just let it ring forever, or do you actually stop it at some point? Personally, I like to stop it because I think that it's nice to have closure to a piece. So again, if you're going to do it, retard into it. So 1E and 2E and 1E and 2E and off. And so keep counting and then cut the sound, but make a hard cut at the sound at some logical point in time. And then that will just give your listeners, even if it's just the cat, then a specific time and say, oh, now the piece is over. I know it's over. Sweet. I know exactly what's going on. So that's how to handle the endings of them. The other one is when you have stacked fermatas. This is the choro tipico again, where we have these like fermatas in a row. When this happens, I think of it as one big fermata. So here, then it's boom, boom, boom. There is a rhythmic structure to it. It's just not random. Because where does that go? It doesn't really take us anywhere. Instead, these are still leading to the downbeat. And so the best way to do that then is to have it some sort of dum, boom, boom, dum, dum. It still makes sense as a rhythm. It still is even notes, like these are written as 3 even 16th notes, right? 3 16th notes. There is still the rhythmic relationship between them, but the overall thing is floating in time. So it takes more time than just 3 16th notes in the piece, but it still floats. So 1 and 3 E and 1 and so whenever you do that, a lot of practicing, a lot of conducting, and figuring out with your mouth how that works is going to be a nice thing to do with your practice, so that you don't, so that you can play them intentionally. And that's the real goal, is to get the musical point across. It's less important to play the fermata than it is to actually make the statement that the composer intended with the fermata. So in this case, it would be figuring it out so that you can sing along with it. All right, these are fermatas. It's a lot of talk about fermatas, but the main rule is just retard into your fermatas and you'll be fine. If possible, crescendo into the fermatas at your cadence spots, and at the end of a piece, then don't drift off forever, but still give it a hard stop at some point. All right, hope you've enjoyed this. Please subscribe to this channel if you haven't, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye.